Wife, 32F, of 10 years cheated on me, 34M, and got pregnant. She aborted and wants to get back with me. She has contact a couple times with her ex in the past 6 months since they broke up for closure. I'm not sure to believe her or not. To be clear, I haven't been the best husband to her either. Since almost the first day of marriage, I would get mad at her for minor things and yell at her or say things with an attitude sometimes, mostly without noticing. Unfortunately, this went on for about 5-6 years. Within that time, I was physically abusive to her a handful of times when I would lose my temper. Every time I would say that I was sorry and that I wouldn't do it again, but it would continue. The whole time she swore to love me with her whole heart, but I was slowly killing her love for me. Finally, on year 7, I attempted to hit her, but she blocked me. At that moment, she realized enough was enough. She swore to divorce me, but I told her I wouldn't let her. She cried for about 3 months straight, losing her mind because she could not comprehend how she could be over me and hate me, even though she loved me so much. It was at that time that I realized my old internal methods of trying to stop me from abusing her would never work. It was then when I sought out therapy. It was only then when I gained the necessary emotional skills to control my emotions and not lose my temper that much, and the physical abuse ceased completely. But it was too late. A few months later, I realized that she deserved for me to give her the divorce. It was the most loving thing to do. I told her I would agree to divorce her, but she never took me up on the offer and just blamed me for not initiating the process. I loved her so much that I also decided that if she would stay, I would take all of her verbal abuse and scorn until one day she could forgive me because I felt I deserved it. She would still explode on me for the smallest things, but I would keep my calm as best as I could. Months later, we went through with moving to a different city together, and we bought a house in the new city, something we had always been planning. However, before we left, she told me she would start giving herself a chance with different men, so she started going out a lot and partying. As a matter of fact, on year 6, she started being unfaithful, and I caught her flirting over text with a bouncer she met. I cried for about 2 weeks straight. I tracked her phone and caught her outside the guy's apartment talking with her along with her friend. She still didn't change her attitude. She stopped talking to the guy after I cussed him out. However, between year 7-10, she had about 2 guys she had talked to romantically over phone and text, but she never moved out, always eventually breaking up with them and me having to deal with her sad moods. Close to year 10, she started talking to a guy in the city we moved to when he reached out to her via social media. She was 100% convinced he was the one, just because of how he talked to her and the trauma they shared. She told me he was an ex-drug dealer and had tattoos all over and carried a gun all the time, but that he had left all that life behind him. Haha. I told her she was making a mistake, and he was a bad person, and only bad things would happen to her if she gave him a chance. She didn't listen, and at that point moved out to an apartment. Long story short, their 2-month affair was, sure enough, full of manipulation, toxicity, controlling, and the most stressful life she's ever had. She was forced to have her every move tracked. During this time, she became very close to his 9-year-old daughter. She would almost always spend nights over at his house, but say she would sleep in the daughter's room every time. She would be partying with him almost 7 nights a week while trying to hold down a job. In the end, after him breaking up with her about 5 times within the span of 2 months, she found out she was pregnant. I visited her at her apartment on our 10-year anniversary while she was pregnant with another man's child. We had so many plans for our 10-year. She missed out on so much. Even then, I gave her a few gifts that I had bought before I knew she was pregnant. I wouldn't have gotten anything otherwise. I didn't want to give them to her, but I would have felt like an Indian giver if I didn't. It was only then that she realized that it wouldn't work out with that piece of trash. She called me and told me she needed help. I never told her to get an abortion, but she knew that if she didn't, it would be the final straw for me, because I never wanted kids, and I'll be damned if I had to raise some scum of the earth's child. It wasn't after I helped her get the abortion that she realized I would be with her through thick and thin. I didn't pay for the procedure, though. She apologized pretty sincerely about that relationship and for cheating and all the other relationships she's had. She said she really regrets hurting me. Shortly afterward, she told me she wanted to try things again after 3+ years of disregard and emotional abuse trying to find her happiness. I held strong through it all, But the fact she got pregnant was the ultimate sin against me in my book. She never had sex with any other man until she met this trash of a human, and I believe her on that. We literally saw him with another bitch while my wife was pregnant, by the way. When she first confessed she was pregnant to me, I asked her how many times they had sex, and she said 2. Later, after the abortion, when I finally had courage to start talking to her about this very hurtful subject, she said they only had sex once and that she was blacked out at the time and doesn't remember anything about that night. I don't know what to make of her changing her story from having sex 2 times to 1. I asked her how many times she blacked out with him, and she told me a total of 2 nights. But that other night she blacked out, she asked him if they had sex, and he said no. The time they did have sex the next morning, he right away told her they had sex. He also told her he wanted to get her pregnant because he wanted a family. This scumbag of a person probably planned it all out. He made sure to fuck her on her fertile days and make sure she was blacked out in the process. She had never wanted to be physical with any of the guys she's talked to, and I believe her. So if all of this is true, then she was technically raped because she was blacked out. If that was true, then that would make me an asshole for hating her for getting raped. We have been getting couples therapy, but gaining trust in her again is hard. She is still really hurt from the pain I've caused her as well. However, slowly my love has gone from a 10% right after she told me she got pregnant to a present 30%. The pregnancy alone killed my love 60% for her instantly. So this brings us to the present day. She has told me she thinks he's a piece of trash and even gave him the nickname Trash. However, she has always missed his daughter. She became very close to over those 2 months. However, it's been about 6 months now since the breakup and abortion, and this trash requests her on social media and starts sending her messages again. At first, for a week, she ignored them and said she wasn't going to answer. But eventually she started saying there were some things she needed closure on. She also confessed she still had feelings for him, which I get, but also that the door is still open for him. After a week, she came into the house crying uncontrollably. She said this trash called her and she answered, and he said that his daughter missed her a lot. He said he couldn't talk now, but that he would call her back in a bit. She said she was crying so much because she felt sad that his daughter still missed her so much. She said she would answer when he called her back. I told her not to answer, but she said she didn't care. I told her in that case I would be present for the call, but she didn't want me to be there. I told her if she didn't have anything to hide to let me. She said she wouldn't feel comfortable if I was present. I told her I didn't want her talking to him, and this would only push us apart, and she didn't care. After almost a whole hour talking to her ex, she said he just told her how much the daughter missed her, and how he was so sorry about everything, blah blah blah. My wife told him it wasn't right for her to talk to the daughter without the mother's permission. She later told me it was really selfish of him to just unload his feelings on her just to make himself feel better and to get it off his chest. She said she didn't even want to ask anything for closure anymore at that point. I was fairly mad at her, but I would probably let it slide if it was a one-time thing. A few days later, he called her again. I told her not to call him back. She didn't care and said she would call him. So I told her, if she doesn't have anything to hide, then record the call. Again, she refused. I told her if she called him back, then our relationship would probably never work, and I would love her even less than I do now. She didn't give a shit and called him back. A little while later, she came back and very excited, saying the daughter wanted to FaceTime her. I told her I didn't care. This time, she went into the next room, as opposed to making the call from inside her car. At this point, I got my stuff and started getting ready to leave to the gym. I couldn't be in the house anymore. I was so mad. She eventually ended the call and asked what I was doing. I told her I was leaving and I didn't want to talk with her at all until later that night. Once at the gym, she texted me saying I didn't care about leaving her alone, even though I know she has abandonment issues. I told her how am I supposed to care if she doesn't care about me? She says whether she stops talking to him or not is her business. I told her it's my business if she wants a relationship with me. Then she proceeds to attack my flaws. Next story, story 2. I currently, 40M, had my ex, 35F, completely destroy our relationship while I was working out of town for a few months. This happened a year ago, and wish I had these stories as a resource while going through it. I have just started to use Reddit and been reading the experiences of others here, and have decided to share my story in hopes it will maybe help others. That way some good may come from some of the worst times of my life. A little backstory for context for the story and insight to some of the decisions I made. When I turned 30, I left the major city in my province. It is like a state if you are an American, because buying just a simple house is over $1 million, and I don't make near enough to afford that. My goal was to move to somewhere more rural to buy a house, meet someone, get married, and have a child or two. It was my only dream I had and believed I could attain it. I lived out in the bush on my stepdad's property in a rundown trailer I bought so I could save money for the first 3 years. I had my dog, but the loneliness of living in the middle of nowhere had got to me. By then I had saved a fair amount of money, so I decided to move into the town. It was nice. It cut my commute down by 40 minutes. I had started to make a few friends and no longer felt so isolated. It was through my friends I met my future ex. Let's call her Kaylee. She had a long-term boyfriend when we first met. Their relationship ended a couple of years after meeting her, and we started dating a few months after. We mostly had a great relationship for the next 4 years. The only thing was, it was on again, off again. She would dump me after I did anything really special for her for a week and beg me to take her back. It was like clockwork. I used to think it was because of her depression and that she didn't believe she deserved to be truly happy. Nowadays, I actually think she might have been cheating the whole time and just felt guilty about it when I did nice stuff for her, but I will never know the truth. I don't care what the reality is anymore anyway. Time has a funny way of making stuff like that irrelevant. We did have one bigger break of about 5 months. When it happened, I took time off work to travel in my RV the whole time, from spring to summer. I really didn't like the town I lived in, and decided to use that time to check out the rest of my Provence to figure out where I wanted to restart my life. She was basically the only reason I stayed for so long. I did have a decent job and family close by, but most people I met there were not good people. Lots of drug users, liars, and general scumbags. I had only a few real friends there. After I got back and had decided where I was going to move to, she had decided she wanted me back. She begged me to stay and be with her. She told me that she wanted to get serious. We started making real progress about getting married, having kids, and looking at buying a house. Everything was coming up Millhouse, and I couldn't be happier. So you can probably guess this is when my tale becomes interesting for you, and life got real bad for me. My career is seasonal. I work from spring to the end of fall and can go on unemployment insurance or find work. My dad had asked if I could help on his farm breeding horses that winter when I had still planned to leave my town. I had promised him that I would, because it would give me a place to stay before people in my field of work would be looking for employees. This had been agreed upon before me, and Kaylee had got back together. Now I have always been a man of my word. It's something I take great pride in. I have always hated liars. I don't mind a little embellishment to make a story more fun, or if two people's stories are different, as long as they both believe that was how the events happened. Everyone remembers things slightly off. She was upset that I had intended to keep my word to my dad, but I had every second weekend off. The town my dad is in was only a 2-hour drive, so I told her I would be back twice monthly for weekends and that it would only be for 4 months. For the first 2 months, everything seemed fine. During this time, I started to look at rings to pop the question and booked an expensive spa for 2 days in May to propose. There was only one weird thing that happened during the first 2 months. On one of my visits, she confided in me that her brother's wife had cheated on him and that their newborn baby was most likely not his. I was shocked that she not only knew, but didn't plan to tell him. She said she didn't want to tell him for fear of breaking up the family. I told her that he has the right to know, and that she was being a bad sister by knowing and not telling him. I also informed her if he found out she knew and didn't say anything that he would most likely kick her out of his life. She made me swear I wouldn't tell him. Even though I thought it was wrong, I did agree to not say anything. It did get me wondering how she could not only not tell him, but stay friends with someone that could do that to her brother. I think that's when I started to question her morals. The 3rd month she asked that I didn't come out because she was sick. I told her I didn't care. I could still come out and take care of her. She convinced me that she didn't want me to come, so I just worked on the farm instead. I switched weekends so I could come out the next, instead of in 2 weekends. The weekend she was sick, her phone was off the whole time, lasting into the week. She told me her phone went through the washing machine. She was actually on a bender, but I didn't learn that till later. So I head out the following weekend. As soon as I arrive, I start getting super sketchy vibes. I was already weirded out about the stuff with her brother and ghosting me for 4 days, as we talked, texted multiple times a day normally. At first, she acts great to me, cooks me steak, and we go out to the bush to have a fire in the snow. At the fire, she really started drinking heavily. She then mentions a guy she had been hanging with, let's call him Brad. So alarm bells start going through my head. We go back to her house and she keeps drinking. I wanted to keep a clear head, so I only had 3 beers all evening. She put her phone down unlocked because of how drunk she was, and I took it to the bathroom with me to look up texts between them. I felt so guilty for doing it at first, but once I see the text between the two of them, the guilt is replaced with rage. I go to her room to confront her and she breaks down. First, how dare I go through her phone? This never would have happened if I would have broken my promise to my dad. Nothing really happened between them, blah blah blah. I was furious and drove off. She blows up my phone the whole time. I don't answer. 10 minutes after I left, her mother called me. She lives at her mom's house. I took the call and her mom said she is freaking out and has harmed herself. I decide to go back and she has a bandage wrapped around her arm. Her mom hid all the sharp objects she could find. She was having a full-on panic attack and begs me to not leave. I told her I would stay if she told me the truth. She admits to hooking up with him one time just that last weekend when she asked me not to come out. Kind of matches the messages and I believe her. I stay there till she falls asleep. Once she does, I send Brad a text saying that she has a boyfriend with some screenshots of our conversations me and her have had that week. I was about to drive back to the farm when the dude called her phone. I pick up the call and tell him I am her boyfriend. He asks if that was a joke and I assure him it is not. He said he didn't know and actually apologized. I tell him that I'm pissed, but if he didn't know, I couldn't blame him. I should have asked him more questions, but I was tired, not thinking straight, and just wanted to go back to the farm, even though it was 2 a.m. by this point. I get home and crash, turned my ringer off because I know once she wakes up, she will start calling like crazy. After getting the horses in for the night, I decided to look at my phone for the first time all day. Around 30 missed calls and a ton of texts. I decide I need another day before I talk to her. Now, while the whole day all I can think about is that it was just one time, she seems to be genuinely remorseful about it, how I'm 39 and really want children before I get too old. I took a call from her the next day on Sunday in the morning. She's still wasted. She hadn't stopped drinking since I was there Friday. We talk, and I tell her that I am really upset, but am willing to give us another chance. I still was in love with her and wanted to have kids, get married and buy a house with her. It was the dream I felt I worked so hard for. She was so happy I took her back and swore to me nothing like this would ever happen again. Basically, I was a fool LOL. So I decided on my next set of days off to borrow my stepdad's summer home on the river so we can have the place to ourselves. I grab food that she loves so I can cook her dinner and try to make it very romantic. I want to rekindle my love with her, so I wanted to go all out on an amazing weekend. I pick her up and she is already a little drunk. I kind of wanted to hang sober, but I don't want to mess up with her, so don't say anything, thinking we can do a sober day when I take her out to go shopping and dinner the next day. When we get there, she gets hammered. Kaylee had brought a big bottle Fireball on top of a bunch of White Claws. I again didn't really drink that night. Once she was drunk and tired, I carried her to the bed. As Kaylee is in my arms, she looks up at me and says in slurred words, "I don't know why you even felt threatened by Joe." I ask, "What did you just say?" "I don't know why you even felt threatened by Brad," she replied. I put her to bed, and my mind starts racing. Now her ex before me has a really close name to the one she said first, but I also know she has a friend named Joe. I only met a couple of times. They were not close or even hung out, but were more like acquaintances. I go in her purse to look at her phone again, but the battery is dead and I can't find her charger. I have an iPhone, so I can't charge it up to look. I didn't sleep that well that night with everything going on in my head. I woke up at 6 a.m. to her being very loud on the phone. I went out to the living room and she had drank all the booze left over from the night before. I ask her who she was on the phone with and she tells me an Uber to leave. I ask, why is she going to leave? Kaylee tells me she is upset that I tried to get into her phone. Guess I didn't put it back in her purse. Must have been out of sorts and forgot. I tell her I can drive her once I go to the washroom and get some clothes on. I go to do that, come out of the washroom to see Kaylee has already left. She was so drunk that she had left half her stuff behind. I decided to have breakfast before bringing her stuff to her house. After breakfast, I packed her stuff into my SUV and noticed it had snowed that night. I could see her footprints out into the driveway. While dropping off her stuff, I noticed there were no footprints leading to her house, so I tried calling Kaylee. No answer. I left her stuff in the snow and decided to drive by her brother's and sister's house to see if there were footprints going into any of their houses, but there were none. I sent her a nasty text about knowing she didn't go home, to go be with Brad or Joe or whoever, and never call me again. It was a lot more profane than that, but that's the gist of it. Cleaned up the house my stepdad lent me and back off to the farm yet again. The next day she blows up my phone and again I wait another day to talk to her. She tells me that she went home, but I know that can't be true from the snow. But she says I must have been mistaken. She apologizes for getting drunk and leavening and that she is going to stop drinking after her birthday in 2 weeks. She has rented a hotel in the town I'm in for her birthday and wants to spend it with me. I agree just because I have to know the truth and want to look at her phone to make sure I'm not crazy. She had gaslit me to the point I was questioning what I saw with my own eyes. A couple of days later, I decided to send Joe a message on Facebook to see if he would give me the truth. I get a text from her telling me not to bug her friend and that she is embarrassed. I apologize and tell her I am excited about her birthday soon. The weekend of her birthday comes, so I go to meet her at the hotel. She brought her sister and other friend along. It actually is a really fun time. The girls did coke the first night into the second evening. I don't really like it, but I figured she can let loose, especially if she is going to stop drinking after her birthday. I also knew by Saturday night that they would all crash hard, so it would give me time to look at her phone so I could know the truth. As I mentioned, the weekend was really fun, so I felt bad about going into her phone yet again. I did it anyway, and my whole world came crashing down. Now I figured that I would maybe see Brad or Joe texts and Facebook messages. Seemed like Brad was done, but Joe and her were totally hooking up. I also found out that she had slept with 3 other guys. I also saw she was using coke all the time now. She did it maybe 3 times a year when we dated, but now it was every weekend. It looked like she started using regularly, right before I left for the farm. Joe helped get it for her too. Out of all the guys, he was the one she hung with the most. Turns out he was also a meth head who was trying to quit for her. She also went to his house the morning she left the other weekend to hook up and buy coke. I was floored. I just stared and took screenshots till the early morning. I decided I wasn't just going to dump her, but I wanted to ruin her life, not realizing she was already doing that all by herself. But hindsight is 20/20. So I started coming up with a plan of what I was going to do. I woke up the next morning and acted like everything was fine and went back to the farm. I was still so upset and didn't want to harm myself or others, so had a family friend take my firearms for a while. I don't think I would have used them on myself or others, but I knew I wasn't thinking clearly and didn't want them in my house while I was like that. I didn't have to see her till I moved back, because the next set I had off, I had tickets for a concert in the city I used to live in. During that time, all I thought about was how I was going to do something to ruin her life. I came up with some small things, but my main plan was to pretend like we were fine and ghost her when my contract was up with my boss next winter. I had promised him another year after Kaylee and I had gotten back together. Just typing it out makes me look back and cringe that I was so crazy. When I went to the city for the concert, I told my best friend, my brother, and a few others my plan. No one liked it and thought I should just go no contact, cut her straight out of my life. That probably was the smart thing to do, but emotion was clouding my judgment. Also, you all would get this story. They even informed me that because I would be lying to her, that I would be compromising my morals and turning into a worse person they didn't recognize. I either didn't see it that way or care. I have a hard time recalling what my brain was thinking during that time. All seems like a haze now that it's been a year. I think I was really upset that my dream and all I had worked for was ruined. A friend later said I may have been in love with the dream and not her. Maybe that's the reason I kept up all this insanity. My time on the farm had come to an end, and I was moving back to the town me and my ex lived in. I was set with my plan, excited to implement it and have what I considered just. But you know what they say of the best laid plans? My ex wanted to go to hang at her brother's as a welcome home party. I went but ended up drinking, heavily drinking, to the point of blackout. I don't remember much from that night but have had it recounted for me. I woke up in the drunk tank. Guess I couldn't lie and play it cool then, huh? The story I was told later is, while at her brother's I had gotten drunk and loud. Kept waking up the new baby, and we were asked to leave. So we caught a cab and I confronted her in the cab, but all I could do was call her a lying, cheating whore on repeat. She got upset and ran into the house, locking me out. I had a bunch of my stuff in her house, so I went to the door and demanded she let me in, all the while still only referring to her as the aforementioned 3 words. She told me to leave, but my jacket and wallet were inside. It was below freezing at night still, and probably wouldn't have made it home in the state I was in. I then kicked in her door to keep calling her LCW and grab my stuff. She was on the phone to the police, so I was taken away by them. One of the lowest points in my life. It still brings me so much shame to this day, but it is what happened, and I am not going to sugarcoat it. I never laid a finger on her, and I am so happy that I hadn't. Laying hands on women in that way is one of the scummiest things a man can do. I had to go back to her house once they let me out because my stuff was still there. I apologized to her mom, who had been at her boyfriend's that evening, promising to repair the door for her. Kaylee begged me to talk to her, and like an idiot, I didn't just leave. I told her I saw everything, and she only admitted to Brad and Joe, lying about them and the others the whole time. Even when I brought up the screenshots, she still couldn't come clean. I left just shaking my head. There is still a ton to this story, but this is long enough. I could do a part 2 if there is interest. Catching you folks up to where I am now, and the messed up things that happened in between. Next story, story 3. My 35M wife, 35F, and I were married 10 years ago yesterday. She has been working on a big project for the last few months. The last 4 weeks or so, she has been putting in extra time, staying late, going in early to finish up by deadline. This is a career maker for her. I work construction. With the rain we have had, we have crazy hours trying to make up time that we missed. So I work 12 HRS on the days it's nice, sometimes a little longer. If it's raining when I get up, I don't go in. Some days we get sent home when it starts. Too dangerous. I usually hit the gym for an hour or 2. Thursday we started at 6 a.m. Mid-morning starts to rain hard. We go home. I go to the gym as usual. I cut the workout short and head downtown to see wife Megan to give her flowers and make plans for dinner that night if possible. We really haven't seen much of each other this week. I went to bed about 9 p.m. She wasn't home. Called earlier, she is working late. Not unusual for past month. I stopped and got some flowers and went into her building about 12:30. Nicole was at the receptionist desk. I told her I got here later than I wanted. Could she put the flowers on Megan's desk? She said, "I don't think they went to lunch yet. Why not drop them off yourself?" She buzzed the door to get back to the offices. The place was deserted. I went to her office. The door was closed. I always walk in unless the receptionist tells me she is in a meeting. I walk in, some guy is standing behind her, nuzzling her neck. She is reaching back over his head. She is giggling only as she can, saying, "We got to get this done." I am gut punched. I slammed the flowers down, said "Happy Anniversary," and walked out. I didn't hear what she said, just went past Nicole, said goodbye, and left. Made it to elevators and out the building, then my phone started ringing. I bawled my eyes out all the way home. Went into garage, pulled my camping gear out of the rafters, and took off. I drove about 2 hours to a state park. I had no idea what to do. I just had to run. I hiked a trail we have been on in the past, about a 3-hour hike. I don't drink much, so I had no booze. I just sat there thinking. Looking back, I am glad I was in a rush. Normally, I bring a .45 cal. With me camping, we have black bears, which generally scare off, but get aggressive if hungry or cubs around. The way I was feeling, I might have ate the barrel that night. My phone was blowing up from Megan, so I had turned it off. I left the park to get reception, turned it on to see my good friend called. I called him back. He said Megan called him to check on me, make sure I didn't do anything stupid. We talked a bit, told him I got to think this through, would catch up on Friday. So while I am thinking about this, I go over our marriage from the beginning to see what I missed. We come from completely opposite backgrounds. My grandfather raised me with my mom. He taught me about life. He had a little saying about everything. He told me marriage would be the hardest job I ever had. You had to work on it every day. God, I miss him. We did not have much, heard Mom and Grandpa having many discussions about bills. They worked hard, and my brother and I did not miss out on anything we knew of. Megan was born into money, not overly rich but very comfortable, went to a great college, always great clothes, new car, etc. And she is beautiful, 1110 beautiful. I would joke with her if she coughed about the silver spoon getting stuck in her throat. We met, hit off, started dating. I was dumbfounded how such a woman would ever be with me. We dated quite a while before she told me about her parents and lifestyle. Our friends called us the model couple because they thought we were so good looking we had to be models. Families were not as kind, afraid of the differences economically would come into play. Her dad and I started to get along, but my mom took some convincing. She graduates, gets her first job. We plan on getting married. We work out between us that we would expose each other to our lives that we live. I took her whitewater rafting. She took me to the symphony. We went ziplining. We went to an art opening, etc. We agreed we had to experience the other's interests. She was really enthused about the more physical things we did. I kind of like the symphony and such. I own 2 tuxes now. I look back and do not see any red flags. Her first 2 jobs she quit because the men all tried to get in her pants. She was paraded out in front for photo ops, invited to conferences when other newbies were not. At dinner at a conference, a partner tried to get her drunk, then tried to force himself into her room that night. She quit. The next job, the same thing, quit again. This 3rd job has women as some of the partners, and none of that BS is in her workplace. She seems very happy. We seemed very happy. So now Friday, I am home. I called her, asked where she was back at work. I, being in a smart-ass mood, said that the marriage is taking second place to her job. She responded, since I would not talk, what was she to do? Fair enough. She will be home in an hour. So I wait. I want to save our marriage. If I am lacking in providing, then I want to fix it. I want to ask why, of course, but I cannot accept a IDK answer. How do I phrase this? What else should I be asking? I know I will get all emotional and forget everything, so over the next few days we will be going over and over this. What she did is wrong, but please no degrading comments. She is still my wife. Thank you in advance.